Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. The jockeying for position is hotting up. I believe that the SADC report on the Zimbabwe elections still stands. And although Zanu PF has gone through and Mnangagwa has taken his oath of office, and so he has sworn in his ministers and members of parliament, etc., etc., trying to make it appear as if it's business as usual. I don't think it is going to be business as usual. SADC and the AU have said this: the 23rd August elections were flawed and illegal, and no legitimate government can emerge out of it. And I think SADC is not going to change its mind on that. So I believe we are going to have ultimately a government of national unity. What we must be careful about, or what we must be very clear about, is what we want that government of national unity to achieve. The number one priority, in my view, is that that government of national unity must deliver democratic changes so that we do not have to again deal with this nonsense of rigged elections. The last GNU of 2008 to 2013, its primary task was to implement those democratic reforms, and it failed to do so. This second one, this next GNU, must deliver on those promises, democratic changes. We should not be where we are as a nation. We should have dealt with this a long time ago. Indeed, we should have had, when we gained our independence, we should have had a constitution and a government that respected the right of every citizen and their freedoms and guaranteed them. We did not. Zanu PF came in and has rigged elections for the last 43 years. What I am concerned about tonight is C. I think there's no doubt about it that C view themselves as the rightful government that should come in. We are in this mess because of C's breathtaking incompetence and corruption. That is at the heart of my argument. And until people understand that, if you understand that, you'll understand why we have to be careful with C getting into power. Here is a video, one of the latest one that Chamisa has produced, setting his stall regarding the GNU.
So when I say God is in it, it's not a statement of weakness, it's a declaration of faith. Not this whole hullabaloo and nonsense to say, no, Psalms 24. God is the author and the owner.
President wedu, President Weshanduko, President anodiwa ne vanhu va Nelson Chamisa, vapa simbiso kune vana vose veZimbabwe, vachitira mbai makabata, musaore moyo nekuti tisu takachigwina chinhu ichi, freedom is coming. Ose matakanana ari kuitwa nana Mnangagwa, kusanganisira kutorera masoja bvudzi, inyaya yekuti vari kutya, they are panicking and they know what's coming for them. nyika yakuzonaka manje. VaChamisa vati kunyarara kwangu hazvireve kuti handina plan, nditori nemutactic wangu wandiri kushandisa, ndiri kutorwa so very soon tichange tichipururudza. So vachinyora nhasi vati, don't despair Zimbabwe, focus, cheer up. Freedom doesn't come easy, but it's coming. Celebrations loading. Some will ask how and when, but it will happen sooner than ever imaginable. Say a prayer for our beloved country. We serve a mighty and living God. Hashtag God is in it. Blessed Tuesday. Zvomene Mr. President, totangira ipapo because taneta veduwe tine dzimwe hama dzakafa kumarali uko kuti nyika isununguke, so hadzingafire mahara. So we will continue holding on. We will never despair, dear President.
There we have it. That was somebody just explaining what Chamisa was saying there. He's basically saying, I'm near becoming the next president. Freedom and celebrations loading. The whole thing about Chamisa is that his party is actually responsible for why Zimbabwe is in this mess. MDC had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms. That is an undisputable fact. And they should have implemented those reforms during the last GNU. They failed to implement even one reform. Not even one in 5 years of the GNU. This is the same party. In 2018, Nelson Chamisa promised the people that he would win those elections because there's got stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Of course, we know he did not have any stringent measures. Zanu PF went on to rig those elections. And by their participation, they'd given SADC the excuse to grant Zanu PF legitimacy. This year, he is on record saying repeatedly that CCC would win big because we have got winning in rigged election strategies. Even when there was all the evidence that these elections were being rigged, he still maintained this position, claiming he has plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Of course, he hadn't, because we know that Zanu PF rigged these elections. If SADC had done what they've done in the past, i.e., rubber-stamped the election process and granted and declared that the elections were substantially free, fair, and credible, Zimbabwe would be in the same position we were in after 2018, i.e., Zanu PF would have been given political legitimacy. This time, SADC refused to rubber stamp the rigged elections. And we've got to applaud SADC and the AU for that. The last thing we want is for SADC to create this new opportunity of a new GNU. And then Chamisa walks in claiming that he is the one who was all behind it. And according to him, it's either he should be given the presidency or there should be rerun in 3 or 6 months' time. Both of those solutions would not serve our purpose. If Chamisa was given the presidency, even if we assume that Zanu PF would let him govern, Zanu PF has got the majority in parliament. Zanu PF owns all the state institutions. There are Zanu PF loyalists in all institutions. That's why we say they are captured. So Zanu PF will see to it that nothing changes. And even if he was to survive the presidency for the next 5 years, in 2028, fresh elections, ZEC will still be the ZEC we have now. The police, the same thing. The army, the same thing. So all the state institutions will still be what they are today. So we'll be back to where we are. We are going to have yet another rigged election. The most important thing for us to do now is sort this mess out, end this culture of rigged elections and bad governance. And the only way to do so is to make sure we implement the democratic reforms. For some of you who may say, what are these democratic reforms? Well, those are the democratic reforms that will ensure that elections are free, fair, and credible. The European Union observed Zimbabwe's 2018 elections, and they came up with recommendations, 23 of them, reform recommendations, that if implemented, the elections would be free, fair, and credible. So even if we say no one knows where to start with these reforms, that is a starting point. But we must get these reforms implemented. At the present moment, we can discuss what those reforms are and how they are to be implemented at a later stage. The most important thing now is to make sure we've got a government of national unity, and that the primary task of that government of national unity is to implement the reforms. And according to our friend here, his ambition is to become president. He is already freedom and celebrations loading. He is not interested in the reforms. Whether we like to admit it or not, because I know there are some people there who are faithful CCC supporters, MDC supporters, they've been for the last 23 years. They think CCC should be given the chance. The truth of the matter is CCC have failed to implement reforms in the past, even when they had the golden chance to do so during the last GNU. To think that they are going to do it now is naive, to say the very least. We need to be clear that we need the GNU, and the primary task of the GNU will be to implement the reforms. And we should also be very clear that both Zanu PF and CCC cannot deliver the democratic reforms, cannot implement those democratic reforms. For the simple reason that if they really genuinely wanted to implement those reforms, why didn't they do so? They had the opportunity to do so during the last GNU. They failed to implement even one reform. It is naive to believe that they are going to do it now. SADC and the AU have done us a great favor, and full credit to them. And they did it not because CCC participated in these flawed elections. They have participated in flawed elections in the past, and SADC decided to rubber stamp the result, and they could have done the same thing this time. So let's not be fooled into believing that it was because of CCC, what CCC did. It wasn't. They disregarded that. In fact, if anything at all, Triple C by deciding to take up the seats, the gravy train seats in Parliament, Senate, and in the Council. They've only helped to endorse Zanu PF's legitimacy. The most rational thing should have done as soon as they heard SADC saying, no, these elections were flawed, is to refuse to take up their seats. They did not. They did so out of greed. We do not want to find ourselves in a situation where we have got a new GNU and it fails to implement the reforms. We want a new GNU that will implement the democratic reforms and finally get Zimbabwe on track. That should be our primary purpose. And we should make it abundantly clear to our Triple C friends that they have failed to implement the reforms in the past. They've been participating in these flawed elections out of greed, pure and simple. And to keep on believing that they will somehow implement the democratic reforms is naive, to say the least. And I think we need to move on as a nation and be clear, what is it we want? And what is it we want is a new GNU. A new GNU whose primary purpose would be to implement the democratic reforms. Nelson Chamisa and his merry men failed to implement even one token reform during the last GNU. It will be absolutely irresponsible that he and his merry men should play any significant role in the new GNU. This is not about self-grandstanding and pretending that they can do everything they want. They have failed to implement reforms, and that is a historic fact. And if we're going to gamble and let them in any way play a meaningful role in the next election, in the next GNU, and find ourselves in a situation where at the end of it, we have not implemented, even if we implement some, we want to implement all of them. It will be absolutely unforgivable. Because I don't think we were very lucky to get this second bite at the cherry. If we mess it up again, it will be unforgivable. It will be absolutely unforgivable. Let's do things right this time. We don't want a Triple C government in the present situation, because the Triple C government is not going to implement reforms. We are not going to repeat this mistake. The government of national unity's primary purpose would be to implement the democratic reforms, to make sure that Zimbabwe's next elections are free, fair, and credible. We must appoint competent people who will get that job done. We know both Zanu PF will be fighting tooth and nail to be the dominant players in the GNU. We must resist that. And we can start resisting it by being absolutely clear what is it we want. And the people of Zimbabwe should be clear what exactly they want. A new GNU whose primary purpose would be to implement the reforms. Period. We are not going to waste this chance. That is my message. Thank you very much and good night.